Call came in on a Tuesday morning just after 7, when I was still in my bathrobe pouring my second cup of coffee. I almost didn't answer. I didn't recognize the number. And at 63, I've learned that numbers I don't recognize are usually somebody trying to sell me something I don't need. But something made me pick up. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was God. I still don't know. "Is this Martin Cruz?" a woman asked. Her voice was professional, clipped, the kind that belonged to someone who made difficult calls for a living. I said yes. "This is Ridgewood Elementary School calling. We have a child here, a little boy, age 6. His name is Tobias. He hasn't been picked up, and his emergency contact card lists you as the primary contact." I set down my coffee mug. Some of it sloshed over the rim. "I think there's been a mistake," I said. "I don't have grandchildren. My daughter doesn't have children." There was a pause on the other end, not a long one, but long enough for me to notice. "Sir, this card was filled out at the beginning of the school year. It has your name, your phone number, and your address on Birchwood Lane. Are you Martin Allen Cruz?" I was. "I am. We've been trying to reach the child's mother since 2:30 yesterday afternoon," the woman said. "We were not able to. We need you to come in, Mr. Cruz. If no one comes within the hour, we'll have to contact Child Protective Services." I stood there in my kitchen, in my bathrobe, 63 years old, retired, widowed 3 years prior, and completely alone. And I thought, this is a mistake. Someone has the wrong Martin Cruz. There are probably 15 Martin Cruz in the state of Virginia. But I went anyway. I don't know why exactly. Maybe because I couldn't stand the thought of a little boy sitting in a school office waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Maybe because my wife, before she passed, always said I had a soft spot the size of a dinner plate. Maybe because somewhere deep down, something I couldn't name yet was already starting to move. The school was about 20 minutes from my house, a low brick building with a flagpole out front, and one of those signs with the movable letters that said "Welcome Meadback Falcons." I parked in the visitor lot and walked in through the glass doors, and a young woman at the front desk looked up at me and said, "Mr. Cruz?" "That's me," I said. She came around from behind the desk and led me down a short hallway and into the main office. There was a row of chairs along one wall. A small boy was sitting in the middle chair, his feet not quite touching the floor, swinging them slowly back and forth. He had dark hair that needed cutting and a blue backpack in his lap that he was holding with both arms, like it was a life preserver. When he heard us come in, he looked up, and then he did something I was not prepared for. He got out of the chair and he walked straight to me, not running, just walking, deliberate and certain, like he had already decided something, and he reached up and took hold of my hand. "Grandpa," he said, "I knew you'd come." I could not speak. I am not a man who cries easily. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer. I coached Little League for 12 of those years. I sat beside my wife while she died, and I held myself together because she needed me to. I am not someone who falls apart, but I stood in that school office with this child's small hand in mine, and I had absolutely no idea what was happening. And I felt something crack open in my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. The principal, a heavy-set man with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, came in and shook my hand and asked me to sit down. Tobias sat beside me. He didn't let go of my hand. "Mr. Cruz," the principal said, "I want to be straightforward with you. We've been unable to reach Tobias's mother. Her name on file is Leanne Whitaker. The number we have is disconnected. We sent a notification to her email 2 weeks ago about a parent-teacher conference and never received a response. Leanne Whitaker. The name hit me somewhere behind the sternum. I knew that name. I hadn't heard it in almost 8 years, but I knew it. My son, my younger son, Owen, had dated a woman named Leanne when he was in his late 20s. They were together for almost 2 years. She was quiet, careful with her words, had a way of listening when you talked that made you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room. I had liked her. My wife had liked her considerably more than she liked most people. My son brought home. And then Owen had ended it. He never told me exactly why. He said they wanted different things. He said it was mutual. He moved to Denver. He called me on holidays. And sometimes on birthdays, and we had the particular kind of relationship that fathers and grown sons sometimes settle into when they don't quite know how to talk to each other anymore. He had never mentioned a child. I sat very still for a moment. "Mr. Burstow, Cruz," the principal said, "do you know the child's mother?" "I may," I said carefully. "I need to make a phone call before I say anything more." They let me step into the hallway. I called Owen. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called Owen. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. I sent a text, "Call me right now. It is urgent. I am at a school in Roanoke, and there is a little boy here who knows my name." I stood in the hallway for 3 minutes. Owen did not call back. I went back into the office. "I'd like to take the boy home," I said, "while we sort this out." The principal exchanged a look with the woman from the front desk. He explained that given the circumstances, the missing mother, the unverified relationship, he was required to contact social services, that a caseworker would need to come and assess the situation before any child could be released to anyone. I said I understood. I asked if I could wait with Tobias. They said yes. We sat together for almost 2 hours. Tobias didn't talk much. He was the kind of quiet child who seems to be thinking about something significant at all times. At one point he pulled a worn-looking picture book out of his backpack and read it by himself, moving his lips slightly over the words. At another point, he looked up at me and said, "Mom says you fix broken things." I wasn't sure how to answer that. I said, "I used to, when I was working." He nodded like that made sense and went back to his book. The caseworker was a young woman named Delia, patient and thorough, with a clipboard and a manner that was professional without being cold. She asked me a series of questions. How did I know the child's mother? What was my relationship to the boy? Had I been listed on any legal documents concerning him? I told her the honest truth I didn't know. She made some calls. She spoke quietly to the principal. She came back and sat across from me and said that given that I was listed as the primary emergency contact and that I was the only adult who had come, and given that the mother had not been reachable for over 24 hours, she was authorizing me to take Tobias home on a temporary basis while they investigated further. She gave me a form to sign. She explained what would happen next. Home visit, background check, a series of follow-up calls. I signed the form. In the car on the way to my house, Tobias sat in the back seat. I had to borrow a booster from the school, and he looked out the window at the Blue Ridge Mountains in the distance and said, "Is your house big?" I said it was medium-sized. He said, "Do you have any dogs?" I said no. I didn't have any dogs. He said, "Mom said you used to have a yellow dog named Scout." I had to grip the steering wheel a little harder. Scout had been our golden retriever. He died in 2019, 4 years before my wife. Owen had named him when he was 9 years old. This child knew things that a stranger's child would not know. Owen called me back just before 6 o'clock that evening. I had set Tobias up on the couch with a grilled cheese sandwich and the television, and I walked into the kitchen and closed the door and answered on the first ring. My son said, "Dad, I can explain." I said, "Please do." What came out over the next 45 minutes was not easy to hear. Owen had not known about Tobias, or so he said, and I believe him, because my son is many things, but he is not a liar. He and Leanne had ended things in early 2017. She had found out she was pregnant after, and she had made a decision not to tell him. He didn't know why she had made that decision. He said maybe she thought he wouldn't want to be involved. He said maybe she was protecting something. Him, herself, the baby, some idea of what she needed her life to look like. He said he had tried reaching out to her once, about a year after the breakup, just to apologize for some things he hadn't handled well. She had not responded. "Did you know she was in Roanoke?" I asked. He said no. "She listed me as the emergency contact, Owen. For her son. For your son. For your son. She listed me and she never said a word to me." There was a long silence. "I think," my son said quietly, "that she was trying to make sure someone would be there if something happened to her." I sat down at my kitchen table. Through the door I could hear the television, some children's program with bright voices. "Where are you right now?" I asked. "Denver," he said. "I'm getting on the first flight I can find." While Owen was making his way to Virginia, Delia, the caseworker, called me with news she delivered carefully, the way people do when they're telling you something they know will land hard. Leanne had been found. She had collapsed at her workplace the previous afternoon, a bookkeeping office on the west side of Roanoke, and had been taken by ambulance to Kalilian Roanoke Memorial Hospital. She had been unconscious. They had found her phone, but it had been damaged. She had no one listed in her hospital paperwork as a family contact. She was in the ICU. "What happened to her?" I asked. "A cerebral hemorrhage," Delia said. "Mr. Cruz, I want to prepare you. The doctors are not certain of her prognosis at this point." I thanked her. I hung up. I sat very still for a minute. Then I went into the living room. Tobias had finished his sandwich and was curled up on the couch with my old throw blanket, the one my wife had knitted years ago in a dark green yarn. He was almost asleep. I sat in the armchair across from him and I watched him breathe, and I thought about my wife, who had died without ever knowing this boy existed. I thought about what she would have made of all this. She would have cried, probably. Then she would have rolled up her sleeves. I didn't cry, but I understood, sitting there in the living room at close to 8 o'clock in the evening, that whatever happened next, this child was not going to be alone. Not on my watch. Owen arrived the next morning, early, still wearing what looked like the clothes he had boarded the plane in. He stood in my doorway and he looked older than the last time I'd seen him, which had been Thanksgiving, and there was something in his face that I hadn't seen in a long time. Something stripped down, raw. I let him in. I made coffee. Tobias was still asleep upstairs in the guest room. Owen sat at the kitchen table and wrapped both hands around his mug and stared at it for a moment. "He's really mine," Owen said. It was not quite a question. "He knows Scout's name," I said. "He knew your mother used to grow tomatoes. He said his mum told him you went to Virginia Tech on a partial scholarship." Owen closed his eyes. "I need to see him," he said. "He'll be up soon," I said. "But Owen, I need you to understand something before he comes down those stairs. That boy has been through something enormous in the last 2 days. He's 6 years old. He slept in a stranger's house last night, which he did without complaint, because his mother put my name on a card and he trusted that. We're going to be very calm and very steady this morning, and we're not going to overwhelm him. Do you understand me?" My son looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded. "Yes, sir," he said. I hadn't heard him say that in about 30 years. It did something to me that I don't have the right words for. Tobias came downstairs at 7:15 in a pair of pajamas with rocket ships on them. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs when he saw Owen. He looked at Owen for a long time. Owen sat very still. "Mum has a picture of you," Tobias said finally. "You were at the beach." Owen's voice, when he found it, was barely above a whisper. "Cape Hatteras. Your mum and I went there once, a long time ago." Tobias came the rest of the way down the stairs and walked across the kitchen and stood about 2 feet from Owen and looked at him carefully, the way children examine things they are deciding about. "Are you my dad?" he asked. Owen's face did something I don't think I could describe accurately. He pressed his lips together. He breathed. He said, "Yes, I think I am." I didn't know about you until yesterday, and I am so sorry for that. But yes." Tobias considered this information. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down at the kitchen table. "Okay," he said. "Can I have cereal?" I laughed before I could stop myself. Owen laughed too, and his eyes were bright, and I turned around and opened the cabinet and got out the cereal. We ate breakfast together, the three of us. Leanne was in the ICU for 11 days. Owen and I took turns sitting with Tobias, driving him to school, picking him up, making dinner. It was strange and it was difficult, and there were moments, usually late at night, when the weight of it came down on me all at once, this new thing that had landed in my house and changed the air of it. But it was not an unwelcome weight. That is the thing I find hardest to explain. On the 4th day, Leanne came out of the coma. She could not have visitors other than immediate family at first. Owen went. He sat beside her bed for 2 hours, and I don't know everything that was said between them because it was not my conversation to know. He told me when he came home that evening that she had cried. He said she had apologized. He said she had made decisions that she couldn't fully explain, except that she had been afraid, and that fear had cost everyone something. He said that she had listed my name because she had always believed, whatever happened between her and Owen, that I was someone who would show up. I sat with that for a while. On the 8th day, they let Tobias visit his mother for the first time. I drove them to the hospital and waited in a chair in the hallway outside the room. Through the closed door I could hear nothing. But at one point I heard a laugh, high and bright, a child's laugh. And I rested my head back against the wall and looked at the ceiling and thought about my wife, who would have been 60 years old this coming March. Leanne was discharged to a rehabilitation facility 3 weeks later. She had some deficits to work through. Fatigue, some difficulty with processing speed, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic. Owen extended his stay in Roanoke indefinitely. He found a short-term rental apartment about a mile from my house. He started looking for remote work. I heard him on the phone one evening, out on my porch, telling someone, a friend, I think, that he was staying because his son was here. Not because of anything else. Because his son was here. Not because of anything else. Because his son was here. He had said his son. Just like that. Easy as breathing. I have been thinking, since all of this happened, about the things we don't know about our own lives. About the ways people make decisions in private that ripple out to touch other people years later, long after the moment has passed. Leanne made a decision to keep her pregnancy to herself, and I don't know all her reasons, and I'm not sure it's entirely mine to judge. What I know is that she also made a decision to write my name on a card and hand it to a school secretary. And that decision changed everything. She chose to trust that someone would come. I have a grandson now. He is 6 years old and he likes cereal with too much milk, and he is apparently very serious about dinosaurs, the specific kind, the names, the errors. He corrects me without mercy when I get them wrong. He calls me Grandpa without any hesitation, like it is a word he has always known. Maybe Leanne taught him that too. Maybe she told him, in the quiet of their apartment on evenings I'll never know about, that there was a grandpa named Martin who fixed broken things. I don't fix things professionally anymore. I'm retired. My knees aren't what they were, and I spend my mornings with coffee and the paper and my evenings with whatever's on the television and whatever book I'm in the middle of. But some things you don't retire from. Last Sunday, Owen brought Tobias over for dinner. We grilled. Owen burned the hot dogs slightly, and Tobias told him they were cremated, which is a word I don't know where a 6-year-old picks up, and we sat on the back porch in the early evening with the mountains going purple in the distance, and I watched my son and my grandson argue about dinosaurs. Tobias wins these arguments every time, and I thought about all the ways a life can shift on a Tuesday morning when you almost don't answer the phone. Answer the phone. That's what I know now. Whatever else you're unsure about, whatever you think is probably a mistake. Whatever feels too strange or too large or too unlikely to be real, Answer the phone. Show up. You can figure out the rest after. What I keep coming back to, months after all of it, is a simple fact. Leanne made a choice. Not one choice. Dozens of them spread across 6 years. She chose to raise Tobias alone. She chose not to tell Owen. She chose not to tell Owen. She chose not to tell Owen. She chose to carry something heavy, without asking anyone else to help carry it with her. I don't know all her reasons. I don't think I'm entitled to all her reasons. But she also made one other choice, somewhere along the way, that changed everything for everyone. She wrote my name on a card and handed it to a school secretary. And in doing that, she decided that if the worst happened, the people she trusted most would be the ones who showed up. That is a kind of wisdom I didn't expect to learn from someone else's private pain. I've thought about what it takes to actually show up when you don't have to, when you could just as easily say, "There's been a mistake," and hang up the phone and go back to your coffee. It would have been easy. It would have been reasonable. I had no legal obligation, no blood connection I was aware of, no roadmap for what any of it was supposed to mean. And yet I went. I think that's the thing nobody talks about. Doing right by someone doesn't always announce itself as the right thing in the moment. Sometimes it just feels like inconvenience. Sometimes it just feels like a phone call you almost didn't answer. Owen surprised me. I say that not as a criticism of who he was before, but as an honest account of who he became in a matter of days. He got on a plane. He sat at my kitchen table and asked the hard questions quietly. He waited for Tobias to come downstairs on his own terms, and he didn't push. That kind of steadiness, in a moment that could have cracked a person open, requires something most people don't give enough credit to. The willingness to hold yourself together, not for your own sake, but for someone smaller, who needs the ground to be solid under their feet. The three of us have had our share of hard mornings since then. Tobias went through a stretch in February where he woke up crying almost every night, asking for his mom. Owen drove over at 2 a.m. twice that week and just sat with him. Didn't try to fix it, didn't explain it away, just sat there. I don't know where Owen learned that, but I was glad he had it in him. Leanne is still in recovery. She has good days and harder days. What she did, keeping a secret that large for that long, wasn't without cost to her. You can feel it in the way she talks about those years. A kind of tiredness underneath the words. But she is fighting back to herself with a stubbornness I find remarkable to watch. She is not waiting for anyone to rescue her. She is doing the work, day by day, in a rehabilitation facility on the west side of Roanoke. And that takes a particular kind of courage that has nothing to do with being fearless, and everything to do with getting up anyway. What I know now at 63 that I didn't fully understand before is this. The consequences of our choices don't stay contained to us. They reach forward. They reach sideways into lives we didn't expect to touch. Leanne's silence shaped 6 years of Tobias's life, and mine and Owen's, and her act of writing down my name shaped what happened next. Both things are true at the same time. We are always, whether we realize it or not, making decisions that will matter to someone else later. Tobias corrected me again last Sunday. I called a Triceratops a Stegosaurus, and he looked at me with a patience that bordered on pity. He is 6 years old, and already he knows what he knows, and he isn't shy about it. I hope he keeps that. I hope whatever the years hand him, he keeps that clear-eyed certainty, that willingness to look at something squarely and call it what it is. I'm going to do my best to be worth the name he called me that first day in the school office. That's all I've got. That's enough to work with.